Hi, welcome to Introduction to Online Drama Therapy with me, Monique. My hope for you is that this webinar will spark some creativity and just give you the tools that you need to really get out there, get your practice online, and enjoy online work in a creative way. So this first half of the webinar is all about ethics and confidentiality, because it's really important to know that working online is not just about moving your drama therapy practice into the online space. There's a lot around confidentiality and internet security that you need to know about. So let's get going. So we're going to start with some ethical considerations that you need to take into account as you start your journey into online practice, or maybe as we've had coronavirus, you've been forced to take your drama therapy practice online. There are still some things you need to know, even if we're working in an emergency way because we're trying to respond to this virus. You can still be ethical and meet the needs of your clients in an ethical and confidential way. So we tend to get really scared when we think about internet security. There are tons of articles at the moment that are going around, especially around Zoom, incidentally, which is what I'm recording this on. So obviously I don't have a problem with it, but a lot of people do. So there's things called Zoom bombing, which is when people have put out calls for a public meeting and strangers have shown up and said some really horrible things, or I don't know, been pantsless in their meeting. So we obviously want to stop that. But I do think that there's been quite an overreaction in the public space around the security of a platform like Zoom or other video conferencing platforms. So obviously, when you're choosing which platform to use for your practice, you want something that's going to give you the options to create a secure environment, or as secure as possible. Now, no platform is ever going to be perfect, but we aren't perfect in real life. In our in-person practice, if someone was really, really motivated, they could probably get into your room and mess with your stuff during a session. But we have to be able to mitigate those risks so that the chance of something like that happening is like 0.00001%. And that's all anybody can really ask you to do. So unfortunately, no program out there is perfect. No one has perfect security. And if someone really wanted to, they probably could hack your data or get into a session. But you want to choose a program that means that person has to be super skilled to be able to do that. Okay. So today I'm going to be talking about Zoom a lot, and I'm also going to be speaking about G Suite, and give you the reasons why I think these are pretty secure platforms, as long as you take your own precautions. Okay, so what does a secure program look like? We know in person that there are things we do to make sure that our client is safe and secure. So it could be like locking the office door if you don't have a receptionist, or making sure that when you talk to your client, that you're actually talking to them and not some random, you don't just give out their information everywhere. So we just need to learn how to do that in the online space. So security, and I'm going to talk in terms of Zoom because that's what a lot of people are using right now. Security for Zoom there's a multitude of things you can do that make it pretty secure. So the very first thing is, if you are using Zoom, you're obviously not wanting to give absolutely everybody access to your space. You want to make sure that whoever should be in the space is there, but you also want to make sure you keep out as much as possible people that shouldn't be there, even when you're running an open group where you're not sure, like different people come every week. So Zoom gives you an option to have a personal meeting ID. You should never use this option, okay? Because that means that is the ID for Zoom for you. It's like giving away your phone number, except this phone number, well, I guess more like a key code to your door that gets people straight into your session. You would never publicize that widely, because if somebody were to get that and they were really, really bored, which people may be, they could then try and get in and see if you were running a session and then enter that session. So what you're going to want to do is set up meeting ID. And that means that every meeting has its own number. So when you send out that link, only that number works for that time on that day, and it'll never work again. Then you also, something that now is default for Zoom, because they have responded quite well to a lot of the security complaints, is that every meeting needs a password. And definitely don't disable the password, right? Because it's just, they're trying to keep you safe, don't get in their way. So you're gonna have two things. You're gonna have your meeting ID, not your personal ID, and a password, and both of those will change for every single meeting. So if somebody by chance did get hold of that information, maybe your client has left their email open, which happens, or maybe they share a computer and someone sees this, they can't just access you at any time. It's just that one time that would be at risk. And it wouldn't even be that much at risk because of the next thing you're going to do, which is make sure you enable the waiting room option in Zoom, which is also in our default. Thanks, Zoom. Good job. So a waiting room is exactly what it is in real life, on offline life. It's just a space that people come in, they put in their meeting ID, they type in their password, and then they're prompted to wait. And you, as the host of the meeting, get to decide when you let them in. And this is really cool for groups. This is also really useful for individual clients. I always use it, and I suggest you always use it. I will say though, there is a setting in Zoom that allows you to hear it like a doorbell when someone enters your waiting room. I would click that option, because if you're like me and you get online a little bit early to make sure everything works out, you've tested your mic, you've tested your audio, you're sitting, maybe you do your email because now everything's in the same little square of your computer. Do your email or you're looking in your diary. If you don't have an audio cue for someone entering your waiting room, you might miss them and you might lose track of time and be a couple of minutes late. So we don't want that. We want a little bing bong, and then you'll know, hey, someone's in my waiting room. Waiting room is cool because no one else hears that bing bong, only you. So if you're in a group and someone somehow gets the meeting ID, gets the password, knows when your meeting is, they still can't get in because they're stuck in your waiting room, and you can just dismiss them. Your clients don't even know anybody was even there. Yeah, so you get to play bouncer and just chuck them out. And then you can do other things, like you can lock the meeting. Say you were having an open weekly support group where you really have to make the details public. Then at a certain time, you can lock the meeting, and that means people can't even come into the waiting room anymore. So it's nice for you as a host, because that means you're not getting distracted out of the process with bing bong, bing bong, bing bong all the time. Yeah, you can decide with your group, okay, after this amount of time, that's it, it's locked, it's just us. So things like this really help us to keep our spaces secure. Unfortunately, Zoom did claim to be like user-to-user encrypted, which is a really cool thing to have, encryption. But the problem is we don't have the technology to have an encrypted video feed that's also good quality. So it was a spurious claim. It's not true, but you can still use it. Okay. I say you can still use it, but I'm not a lawyer, right? So absolutely everything that you hear today, you need to check with your malpractice insurance provider and with your professional body, yeah, your board. So you need to follow the standards of your practice in your country. Okay, so I obviously try and hold myself to quite high standards and to the best practice of South Africa, where I trained and am registered, but you need to check with your insurers, with your board, just to make sure that everything's above board. So I know, for example, there are some insurers in South Africa who are saying no to Zoom completely because they panicked a bit with the Zoom bombing thing, in which case you'd need to use something else. Okay, so please do check. You don't want to be not, you need to be covered, especially during this time. Okay, then you're going to want to definitely add a social media policy and an electronic communication policy to your informed consent documents. I'm hoping that some of you might have something like this already. Maybe it's already just written into your informed consent. But the more we move online, the more likely it is that people will find us online, and the easier it is for them to Google us or to Facebook friend us or to do any number of other things. So a social media policy, which you'll get. I'll give you a copy of mine as part of the resource pack. It says things like, you are welcome to Google me. So let's be honest, all our clients do. They all Google us. But it also says things like, I will never Google you. And that if you should friend me on Facebook, I won't reply to that Facebook request. And it's really important to have that conversation up front, especially with teens or children that you're dealing with, because you don't want to get to the stage where they've sent you the friend request and then it's a problem because you haven't replied. So you want to be upfront and say, listen, it's about your confidentiality. So I don't want anybody else to know that you come to therapy. That's your business. If you want to tell people, that's absolutely fine. But I will just stay out of the conversation to keep your work with me confidential. And then the electronic communication policy is super important because there is a lot more complicated stuff that can go wrong in online therapy, right? And at some point, probably everything that can go wrong will go wrong, probably in the same call, right? So in-person therapy, it's very rare that someone will get up halfway through and walk out. And if they do, you can follow them and try and talk them down, whatever happened. Worst that'll happen is either someone will miss completely, or they'll cancel their appointment really close to the appointment, or maybe they'll arrive late. So on top of those three things, when you're having online therapy, someone can leave really easily. It's a button. It's leave meeting and they're gone. And they don't have to reply to you at all. Maybe you're not in the same country, or maybe you just, who has the capacity? You're not going to go and drive down the road to get them. So it's much easier for people to leave. Then there's also a whole lot of technology that can go wrong. There's my internet can go out, or my computer could die, or your internet, your client's internet can go out, and their computer could die, or any number of these things. So it is absolutely a personal choice what you decide to be part of your policy. Okay, so you can get advice from other people and how they do things. I'll send you how I do things on my end, but it's really up to you. At what point, when something goes wrong, do you say, oh, we've only just started, let's reschedule? Or do you say, I'll call you? Maybe if you're in the same country, it's easy enough to phone call, or use something like WhatsApp, which is encrypted. Or you might say, okay, well, if we get to 40 minutes, we're pretty much done. We'll pick it up next time. Things like that. And it's important to have a very clear and precise guideline for what's going to happen, and to keep that conversation going. You don't want to just put it in your documents and never mention it, because there's a lot of anxiety around being online. There's a lot of anxiety around being in therapy, and now you're putting them together. So you want your client to know if anything does go wrong, they go, you know what, it's fine, because my therapist said she would try for 5 more minutes to reach me again on Zoom, and then after that she would phone me. So I just need to sit back and check for the new Zoom meeting or whatever it is. Yeah, so you just want to take away all that anxiety around what happens if, and go, it's gonna happen. It's fine if it does. It is just part of life, right? And just modeling that behavior. So the next thing you want to think about is possibly changing your intake procedure. And I don't know about you, but for everybody I've spoken to so far, no one really did intake as a drama therapist. We don't have an intake procedure. We don't have intake forms, really. There's personal information that we need, like an emergency contact or a little bit of background information or your insurance details or whatever, but that's about it. And we tend to say like, no, we work in an embodied way and we don't need to deal with a diagnosis, blah, 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 which is fine and true. But online therapy is different, and online drama therapy needs to be a little bit more strict. So I'm going to send you a copy of my intake procedure, my intake form, so that you can see what I do. But you're going to get a shock, because there's a lot of questions there that I don't think drama therapists tend to ask up front. I don't think they tend to ask at all, because a lot of the times we're dealing obliquely with situations. So I ask things such as, have you ever been abused? Yeah. What are your views on sex and drugs and alcohol, and not quite rock and roll, but that would be helpful. Where do you work? Tell me about your childhood, tell me about your family, tell me about your spouse. Yeah, a ton of different questions. And I'll tell you why I do that in a little while. But suffice to say that your intake procedure needs to be a little bit different online. So how my intake works is someone will contact me and hopefully they'll email me and tell me a little bit about what they're going through. If not, I'll ask, just what are your presenting concerns? Where are you at? Why are you reaching out? And then I'd like to set up a 20-minute free consultation over Zoom or whatever platform I'm using, because one, it lets me know, is this person going to be okay joining a Zoom call? Is their internet okay to have this form of therapy? But it also lets us have a discussion about what is drama therapy, what is online drama therapy, what are their expectations, what are they hoping to get out of it, who are they, who am I, is this going to work? If that is all cool and dandy, then we go ahead and I will book them in for however many sessions. They'll pay and then they'll get the intake form. So I deal with a secure email system called Hushmail. So Hushmail is a paid system. It's just under $10 a month. I think if you buy a year, then you get a month free. So it's like $109 US. And for me, it's worth every penny because it also comes with secure forms. So it's really easy to build your forms. You like drag and drop and you build your form. And it means that you're not just randomly emailing this thing to someone and they're not just sitting on their computer and do they save it? Do they type it? Do they like delete it afterwards? Like, how do you keep that secure? What if they share a computer? Or what if they're accessing a public computer even? So the secure form, I send them a link and they fill out the form online on a secure website and it comes straight to me. So for me, that was really important to have that capability. It is not the only way to do things, but it works for me. And also because I do email drama therapy, which I can then send encrypted emails, which is another webinar. But yeah, so that's my intake procedure. And there are several, I think, very good reasons for that. So client suitability is huge for online therapy, right? This is, if drama therapy is not for everyone, then online drama therapy is for even fewer people, sadly. Well, not sadly, it's pretty niche. So people need to know where I am. Like I'm in Thailand, and so I might be in a completely different time zone. So I need to tell people where I am, but I also need to inform my clients, hey, there's a possibility that if you email me in crisis, I won't be able to reply. Even if you phone me, like it might be midnight, I might be asleep, I might be out. My office hours are not your office hours. So they need to understand that. And in saying that, I think for me personally, having a client that's going to be in crisis often just isn't suitable or appropriate for online therapy. So for me personally, and this is different for everybody, but I don't work with like borderline personality disorder or major depressive disorder, someone who's often suicidal, someone who self-harms to the point where I think may be suicidal, things like that. I refer out just because if I'm not even in the same country, it's not, imagine this. I'm seeing a client, everything's okay, but something triggers them, or for some reason they drop the call and they leave. And I now, in a different country, different time zone, have to figure out what are my next steps? What do I ethically have to do? What do I feel I need to do? Can I phone them? What if they don't answer? Do I phone their emergency contact? Maybe. But that's terrifying to be in that situation. So for what it's worth, I think it's good to think about who your ideal client would be, but also who is a client that would be completely unsuitable. And that's someone you would refer out for your health and for theirs. So definitely have referrals and get onto some Facebook groups for referrals so that you can refer out depending on their country. So it's also really important, we know we need to have emergency contacts, but I also ask for the details of a physician, a doctor, a therapist, someone else that has in the medical field that has seen this person recently, or maybe it's their family doctor, and ask for their name and their details, contact details, because that's just one more level of access I can have in an absolute emergency. So you might want to consider doing that as well. I think that it is good practice. And then also on the form, there's a ton of practical concerns, right? So I have ticked the box of things that you have used before. And it's like, do you send text messages or SMSs? Do you pay for things online sometimes? Do you talk to your friends on Facebook or access social media? All of these things, so that I can start to get an idea of how much of my client's life is online. Because if I have someone who won't even send a text message, it's going to be really hard. I'm starting from zero. It's not impossible. And some of your clients, you may have been forced now to take online because of the coronavirus. So that's different. This is specifically for new clients. I would say there's some people that are definitely just going to benefit more from in-person therapy, and that's fine. And then I also asked them things about the internet. How good is your internet speed? What's your connection like? What kind of hardware are you using? Are you using a laptop or a phone or a tablet? Anything is fine, but it changes the choices I make with the apps and the platforms that I use. So it's good to know that upfront, so I don't plan for something that doesn't end up being possible. And then I'm also going to remind them about space and confidentiality. So I'm just going to say, it's really good if you can have a room with a door that closes, but also remember that, walls are thin, and someone can hear, even if they're not maliciously sitting there trying to hear. So just reminding them that they need space. And if they don't have access to their space, then maybe they would be better for text-based, like email drama therapy, or instant message drama therapy would also be good. Or I can refer them to an in-person therapist. The last two things are personal things that I've seen work for me. When I'm working in person, I don't mind if the person's first language isn't English, and I don't mind if their English isn't particularly good. Because drama therapists, we work in an embodied way, and we can make meaning together. And in person, it's a lot easier to figure out what does this person mean, and they can figure out what I mean, and we're okay with silences and all that kind of stuff. Online, things can get lost in translation much easier. So I don't really deal on the phone with my clients. I deal mostly via email or text. So I'm going to need them to be okay with receiving maybe slightly complex instructions of how to download certain apps or how to access the platform. And they need to be able to do this in English because I can't do it in another language. So if you have multiple languages, awesome. But if you don't, something to be aware of, okay? Should I refer this person to someone who has the same mother tongue as them? I mean, I always think that it's better to access therapy in your home language, but it's not always possible. So that then becomes an ongoing conversation, and you need to be really humble and open about when you don't understand, because you need to model that, because it's much scarier for your client to say, I don't know what you're doing, I don't know what you're saying. It's hard for them to say it. It's easy for you to go, I didn't get that. Can we try again? Okay. And then the last one is age. So for new clients that I have never seen in person before, I personally don't see people under 11 years old. And that is purely because I want to try and protect their confidentiality as much as possible. So I want to know that they can close the door and they can boot up the computer and log into all their own accounts where they only have the password, and they can access therapy with me. And then when they log off, mom or dad or caregiver doesn't even have the passwords to be able to open up and look through what's happened, if we're saving stuff. So it's a really fine line, right? Because you want safeguarding, you want a parent to be close by in case anything happens. So obviously you'll have their details, but you also don't want the parent to feel like they have to hover in case they need to help or jump in. So for me, when I'm dealing with clients that can be in therapy independently, I'd want 11 and above. But it is personal, and it's up to you, as long as you are thinking about this type of thing and thinking about how you work that relationship with the parents as well. All right, so I want to speak briefly about disinhibition effect. So if you're a total nerd like me, you're going to want to go to the bottom of the PowerPoint, which I'll send to you, and you're going to want to look at that website because it has tons more information than I can cover here. It's just beyond the scope of this webinar. But online disinhibition effect, we've all actually experienced. We just don't necessarily know the psychological term for it. And it's just the loosening of social restrictions, social norms, social inhibitions in the online space. So if you think of internet trolls and people that say really nasty things, they have this split, right? Oh, I just did that online. That's not me. The true me is a real good person. I would never say that to anyone in real life. But on the internet, those rules don't matter. Those rules don't apply. It can also go the other way. So you see people on GoFundMe's or people paying for someone else's child's ballet classes because they just felt empathetic to the story. And the person who pays for that online may not even give the time of day to someone who's asking for money in real life. So it goes both ways. Okay, we can be really mean and we can be really, really good. And most of us just swing between those two all the time. So in therapy, if your client is disinhibited, it might mean that they share a lot, too much, too soon. And so it might look like a client you've barely met. It's your first or second session and suddenly they're just blah, life story, all trauma, everything is just out on the table. So you could be, you could sort of think, hey, I'm a really good therapist. This is amazing. They obviously feel safe opening up to me. But no, they're probably just disinhibited. So they might actually not make the connection that this person, my therapist, is a person with a family or with a house or with another life or with friends outside of this small little square on the internet. So often when we make relationships or friendships with people online that we've never met in person, we share with them much deeper and much quicker than we would with our friends in real life. And sometimes that's great, but sometimes that's really damaging. So remember, they have to log off at the end of the session and they might go, oh my God, I have never shared what I shared with anybody. I haven't even told my mum. And suddenly I'm telling this person, this stranger, because I don't know if I can trust them. There's no therapeutic relationship to hold what's been shared. There's no basis of trust. And so this person can feel shame, embarrassment, guilt, and they might ghost you. They might go, you know what, I can't even face you. I don't trust that you're just going to accept what I've told you. I don't trust that you're not going to tell everyone somehow. You've got all my details now. I bet you're going to tell everybody about this. So yeah, you can see how it can be quite a big problem. So we need to be the brakes for our clients until we can build that trust and really build the therapeutic alliance or therapeutic relationship. And you don't want to shut people down immediately. You don't want to tell them, don't tell me this, I can't hear it, because that's also very damaging and very shaming. But you want to be able to just create distance. So maybe you want to introduce an art exercise or a bit of reflection, or just change tactfully, so that you just build in a little bit, like pushing the brakes nice and slowly, so that the person just can kind of catch their breath and think a bit more clearly about what they're actually saying and who they're saying it to. And that's also why it's helpful to have a really in-depth intake form, is because if I can see that someone hasn't answered any of my questions about, say, about their family or about their childhood, and then in the first or second session, suddenly they're telling me everything about family and childhood and trauma, then I can go, if this person couldn't even write it on a screen, they didn't feel safe enough to just type it into a form, it doesn't make sense that they would suddenly feel safe enough to share it with me. And I can go, hang on, let's put the brakes. Yeah, let's take a step back and figure out how to give them some more distance. It's also true that I might get the intake form and realize only then, now that the person has booked a few sessions with me, that they really aren't suitable for therapy. I might only realize in the second session anyway, because a form is not infallible. But the idea is that you're taking as many steps as possible to make sure that online therapy is appropriate for that person before they get into the space. And if they get there and you can really see it's not working, there is nothing wrong with having a conversation about referral and about being open with that. And I think it's really important. And it's an important relationship building thing to say, I can't facilitate this for you, but here's someone who can, and how do we get you in touch? So yeah, disinhibition effect is super interesting, and I really recommend you nerd out a little bit, because I guarantee you'll find some stuff that you do, which is really interesting. And if you're interacting in the online world with your clients, you can also suffer from that as well. So you need to be able to say, hey, I want to share. I feel like oversharing with my client or self-disclosing with my client, and you can recognize that for what it is as well. Cool. So the last thing we're going to do in this half of the webinar is go through 2 program choices. I'm going to do it really quickly, and in the next session we're going to play a little bit more with Zoom and with some of the other programs I'm going to briefly mention here. So Zoom has gained huge popularity, and it's for 2 reasons basically. One, there's a free option. So anybody want to pay for anything, you know, just to phone my friends? So it's free, awesome. 2, it's really, really easy to access and use. Like, you would have seen, if you've ever used Zoom before, or if you've ever had to set up a meeting before, you literally send someone the URL, the website address, and they click through and they're in. Yeah, it's like 2 or 3 clicks, done. You don't have to be good at tech to get into Zoom, yeah? So that's why it's gotten so big, because it's easy for people, like even the people who are technophobes completely can do Zoom. So that it's also a problem, right? When you make something so easy to access, you make it less secure, yeah? Because there's just less steps that people need to get into it. So it's a payoff, right? There's nothing wrong with using Zoom, provided in your country it's allowed. So USA, I'm looking at you because you need HIPAA compliance. And then some other countries, certain insurance providers have like completely said no. And also some individual organizations have got scared by what's happening with Zoom at the moment, and they've said no. So if at any level you are not allowed to use Zoom, just don't use Zoom. Yeah, that's fine. There's other options. But if everybody's saying that's fine, and you've put all your security features in effect that we spoke about before, then I think Zoom is a decent option. I enjoy Zoom because it has extra features that I think work very well for drama therapists and creative arts therapists, and because it's easy to get onto. Because if we as drama therapists aren't super techie, our clients are even less techie, right? So you want to ease that transition, especially if you're taking people from in-person therapy and they're pretty much being forced to access you online now during coronavirus. You want to make that transition very stress-free, because everything else is really stressful right now. So yeah, if you want to go for free Zoom, you need to know a few things. Obviously, one-on-one meetings, so just you and one client, that is, you don't have a time limit on that, okay? As soon as you get 3 people in a meeting, so you and 2 other clients, then you've got 40 minutes and then they cut you off, okay? So if you're doing group work, I honestly don't think it's appropriate to use free Zoom unless you absolutely have to, because it's just, money is a huge problem. Remember, it's only you who has to pay, not your client. Okay, your clients just always access Zoom for free. I personally have upgraded to the next level of Zoom, which is just under $15 US a month, which is not inaccessible for me currently. And that gives me unlimited amount of time, or I think it's like 24 hours. I can have a meeting with a group for 24 hours, which I will hopefully never do. But it works for me. That being said, the US has HIPAA, which is like their gold standard legislation for protecting clients, like healthcare clients and patients. And I prefer to stick with HIPAA because even though it doesn't affect me personally, it is really good legislation, and it really does try and protect the client. And so free Zoom is not HIPAA compliant. Okay, so it's just, if you're in the US and you're using free Zoom, you're not covered. Okay. You might be okay now, because I know a lot of our boards and organizations have sort of relaxed the rules at the moment because of coronavirus, but certainly afterwards it's going to go back to what it was and it's not going to be covered. The HIPAA compliant version of Zoom is $200 US a month. So 200 US is just, I mean, for me, it's completely inaccessible. And I think for most people it is. What it's meant for, though, is it's meant for a clinic or a company to buy that, and then they can give access to 10 people in their company. So then those 10 people have the BAA, they've signed the contract with Zoom that says, okay, it's covered, it's HIPAA compliant. So I have heard some people say, well, I can go in with my friends, so me and 9 other people, we can buy the HIPAA compliant version of Zoom and then we just share it. The problem with that is that only the person who originally signs the agreement and who pays for the account, only that person is covered. Okay, so the 9 other people, even though they're accessing the HIPAA compliant Zoom, it's actually not covered. Okay, so it's just personally not an option for me. Okay, so we'll come to another option later. But yeah, also the other thing, if you're accessing a free program, right, if something were to go wrong, you don't have a lot you can do. Your insurance provider is going to go, you're doing the free version, really? The company itself is going to go, but we have a HIPAA compliant version. Why didn't you do that? Yeah, there's no leg to stand on. Whereas if you're paying, even if it's just the next one up, at least you have access to better helplines, yeah, and you can say, listen, I am paying for this service, and this and this and this needs to change. So it just gives you a little bit more power. Okay. That being said, Zoom, super easy. There are a ton of extra features. So one of the coolest ones is breakout rooms, and that's good for group work. So I can click a button and people can be sent into different groups. So I can choose, I want 4 people in 3 rooms or whatever, 4 people in 2 rooms. I can even send individuals to rooms so they could have a reflective space. And they literally have their own little group in Zoom, and they can talk together, and you as the host can jump in and out of each. You set a time limit, and then everyone comes back together. So I think for group work, for drama therapy, the breakout rooms is super simple, and it doesn't require anything on the client's part. They don't have to open up any other program. You are the one who just set it and go. You can do it randomly, so Zoom will assign people randomly, or you can do it manually. While in the call, you don't have to do it beforehand. And you can say who needs to go to each group. So you could repeat groups if you were having an ongoing process. The other thing that's cool is Zoom Whiteboard. So we're going to play with Zoom Whiteboard a little bit in the next webinar, but it is an accessible way of having a artistic collaborative space. Okay. Then you can share your screen like I'm doing now with my PowerPoint, but I can also share anything from Google Drive or anything else that I have open on my computer. I can share, and people can annotate. So I will teach you in the next webinar how to annotate, but basically it means anything that I share, everybody in the group or everybody on the call can draw on and write over, and so anything can become a collaborative artistic space, which I really like. All of those things are easy to access. They're in Zoom. I click a button, you click one button maybe, and we're in. So for the client who's really a little bit technophobic or doesn't really know what to do too much, Zoom is a great option, and you can still be spontaneous and go, whiteboard, this is the time for share screen. So that's really cool. The other option I want to talk about today is G Suite, which is just the fancy word for all of the Google products. So for video conferencing, I am not talking about Google Hangouts, because Google Hangouts is just the video quality isn't great and the calls drop a lot, but I'm talking about Google Meets. So it is only a paid option. Okay, so there's no free version of this, but the cheapest option is just $6 a month US. So it's super accessible. And with that $6 a month, it is HIPAA compliant. Okay, so you're going from $200 for Zoom to $6 a month to be HIPAA compliant. And actually, I was reading today that it's a lot of the Google products that are included in the compliancy. So Google Docs, Google Drive, Google Meets, and then the text version of Google Hangouts, not using the videos, but just the chat that is covered. So you need to make sure that you are paying. Yeah, you want your $6 a month at least, and then you're going to sign the BAA with them, and then there you go, HIPAA compliance made easy and accessible. It is pretty secure as Google can be. They're a big company and they're making changes all the time and updates to how to be secure. But again, you can have one ID per meeting. You don't have one personal ID. You're changing the ID every time. So it's pretty secure. Unfortunately, now this is the big thing with any of the Google products. Google Meets is made for video conferencing. You can share your screen, but that's about it. Yeah, there's no whiteboard. There's not a lot of fancy frills. Okay, so that's a problem. But Google has an amazing product, which I'm going to talk about in the next webinar, called Jamboard. Jamboard is a free app. Okay, anybody can access it, but you do need a Gmail account. Okay, so this is the other thing. If you want to use G Suite, you're going to maybe need to talk your client through setting up a Gmail account. I don't think it's a terrible thing, because I think if they don't have one, it might be a great time to set up an email account that is just for therapy. So it's like it's more secure because they're less likely to access it randomly on shared computers and leave it open. And the Gmail account is free. Okay, so Google Meets, Jamboard, and Gmail is free for your client. You're the only one that's paying for the G Suite. But it's an added extra, right? Jamboard as well, it has tons more options that you'll see in the next webinar for all sorts of artistic endeavors, but it is a separate program. So you're going to have to guide your client to, join your Jamboard. It's a different program. It's not just as easy as one click in Zoom. So these are the two options that I would say. There's obviously tons of other stuff out there. There's like Simple Practice and Doxy and VC and all of these things that are awesome in their own way, but these are the two options that I really like for drama therapists specifically. But get in touch if you want to ask any questions about the platform that you are already using, because everything has a way to do things. Yeah, online drama therapy is just about saying, what do I want to do? And then figuring out the app you need to do it. That's all it is. So yeah, join me in the next webinar and we'll go through some of the really fun techniques you can use in these programs. Thanks, guys.